Hospitality Meets is brought to you by RotaCloud, the simple workforce management software for hospitality teams. RotaCloud lets you create and share rotas, record attendance, and manage your team's annual leave, all in less time than it takes to make a brew. It can also make life easier for your staff, allowing them to check their rotas, request holiday, and even pick up extra shifts, all through the RotaCloud mobile app. Start your 30-day free trial today by visiting rotacloud.com/Phil and find out how much easier managing your team can be. Welcome to Hospitality Meets with me, Phil Street, where each week we take a light-hearted look into the stories and individuals that make up the wonderful world of hospitality. Today's guest is David Cochrane, MBE, CEO of Hit Scotland, an all-round industry legend and champion. Coming up on today's show, David proves he's a modern man.
I do like a bit of TikTok, actually.
Phil tells us one of his strengths. I'm very good with milk carton nibs. And David gets thrown in at the deep end.
Someone introduced me as being the person in charge of the Commonwealth Games.
All that and so much more as we chat through David's quite wonderful story so far. This chat is absolutely riddled with stories and anecdotes from one of hospitality's finest human beings, and as a result, I'm sure they'll all find this entertaining from the off. Not only that, it's a great insight into the wonderful work that Hit Scotland are doing. So please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give us a like and a share wherever you can. Enjoy! And a huge Hospitality Meets welcome to David Cochrane.
Thank you, Phil. It's a pleasure to be here on this chilly start to 2025. But
it has been, hasn't it?
Oh, it really has been. I mean, it's just almost typical now. You get the chilly weather, but beautiful blue skies. Whereas up here in Scotland, it's been a bit of a grey, cloudy, nondescript Christmas, which has not inspired me to get out to walk in the Scottish mountains, more inspired me to open a box of chocolates and watch a movie.
Yeah, so now you have to get out and walk in the Scottish mountains to offset.
The excuse list is gone to zero. So yes, that's right. It's I'm stereotypically fulfilling all the resolutions for 2025. So let's see how far I get.
Right. Yeah. Well, we can not get into anything like dry January in this house because both mine and my wife's birthday are in January. So there's no way in the world dry January is happening.
And there's an element of supporting our friends in the licensed trade as well. You know, I mean, it's moderation is all good for everything. But yes, completely switching off for a month is it's a tough gig.
Yes, indeed. Absolutely. Just tell the world what it is that you currently do.
Well, I'm David Cochrane, as you've already said. I look after what's called the Hospitality Industry Trust for Scotland, or HIT Scotland as we're more commonly known. This is actually, looking at the calendar now, my 20th anniversary with HIT Scotland. So I've not been rumbled yet, Phil, and I've enjoyed every minute of it because we're a Scottish charity. We do a number of events, and I'll tell more later on, but we have a lot of fun with the industry. But the most important part, I guess, is that we're supporting the industry and developing its people. And we provide scholarships, which, again, I'll give more detail later. So that's me. I live in Scotland. I'm married with 2 children, 2 grown-up children. In fact, hot off the press, but not exactly in this sort of context. I can't believe I'm going to be a grandfather next month.
Really? Congratulations.
Well, thank you. I don't feel old enough to be a dad, yet alone a granddad. But so life has a funny way of sort of moving you along. And so we've got a son that's getting married this year and a daughter who's expecting her first baby. So the whole Cochrane family is excited for all sorts of kind of new beginnings in every shape and form.
Fantastic. That's great. But the thing that I always remember, somebody said this to me once, and I thought this was just genius, is that when you become a father, you have to grow up. When you become a grandfather, you can all bets are off.
I think you're right. I've already got my eye on sort of Hamleys and some of the toys and things that I never got, and or things I'd like to revisit, like train sets and Scalextrics and toy forts and all sorts of things. So whether it's a boy or a girl, it will be equality's the name of the game.
Yeah, and it's for the kids. It's for the kids.
Of course, that's right. I haven't got my wish list here, honestly.
Superb. Right. So, take us back, David. Take us all the way back to the beginning of your career. How did you get into hospitality in the first place?
Well, interesting, because I, many years ago, lived in Edinburgh, went to school in Edinburgh. My dad was a headmaster in Edinburgh, so we lived in a schoolhouse. And living in a schoolhouse in a big school in Edinburgh tends to mean you've got visiting rugby teams, you've got visiting speakers, you've got visiting schools, you've kind of got an open house, really. And the sort of school it was, my mum, who enjoyed cooking, used to and I don't actually know how this happened, but a chef or a few chefs from the local army barracks used to come and help, particularly at the weekends, and do big pots of stews and curries and sort of literally feeding, maybe not the 5,000, but possibly feeding the 50 to 100 that might be coming for after games meals in our house. And I used to enjoy sort of helping them and sort of, mucking around with them. But being the sort of school it was, and my dad being a headmaster, his expectations, he would have been thrilled had I gone to Oxford or Cambridge or joined the Royal Marines or that sort of thing. So there was a parallel path going on. But when it came to a crunch around about 18, 19 years of age, the Commonwealth Games were in Edinburgh. And I worked up at Pollock Halls, which is Edinburgh University, where all the athletes were staying. And this was back in the days of Steve Ovett and Daley Thompson, and when Princess Diana used to come and visit.
Right.
And I was really quite excited about this whole sort of giving hospitality, looking after people, the world coming to Edinburgh, and actually getting quite a lot of attention as well from the kind of world's press for the games and everything that was going on. So I sort of felt this was quite an exciting place to be. And I never had thought about continuing at that, but I always liked sports. I always got myself quite fit. So being part of kind of hospitality, but in a sporting environment, really kind of ticked a lot of the boxes. A quick sort of funny on that, Phil, is that a few decades later, when I was speaking at something, and someone introduced me as being the person in charge of the Commonwealth Games back in 1986. Little did they know I was actually really just in charge of 14 Purgle milk machines, and all I did was change the milk cartons every day because those athletes just drank so much milk. So I didn't want to correct the person thinking I was in charge of it, but it also did elevate me by about 25, 30 years as well. So I didn't
Yeah.
know quite how old they thought I was, but that was a sort of baptism of fire, and I never looked back. Really, I went to Sheffield, did a hospitality management program after that, and then it was Ring and Brymer who were the kind of outside arm of Gardner Merchant back in the day, which are now called Sodexo, more commonly known. And I suppose by doing the hospitality management course and then working for Norfolk Capital Hotels for a little while, I suddenly realized that actually hotels were wonderful, but I quite enjoyed the facilities management contract catering side because I literally was working Monday to Friday, which was a
Right.
treat
Yep.
for our industry.
Absolutely. Yes. No, I dipped my toe into the very same industry through my career, and it was for the very same reason that actually the Monday to Friday element was quite attractive to me at that time of my
Yeah.
life.
Yes, me too. Early 20s, it's I'd like to think I had a social life then, but I'm not. I think I did.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I love the story around the fact that you were the head of Commonwealth Games. I mean, we'll make that stick. I mean, in principle, you could argue that without the milk, there's no Commonwealth Games.
Well, absolutely. The athletes have to be fueled up every day, and so keeping that machine going as such. I was quite a dab hand at sort of chopping off that plastic thing that comes out the bottom of the boxes that you get the milk from. So
Yeah.
yeah, it certainly kept me busy. But you're right, the athletes were running on their bellies. So
Yeah, I could see that in a job interview as well. What are your main strengths, David? I'm very good with milk carton nibs.
that's it doesn't have quite the same panache now, but
So
I'll add it to my CV, Phil.
absolutely, get it on there. Get that on that LinkedIn profile. Yeah. So how did it develop forward from there?
Well, I mean, Gardner Merchant, we're looking at where I was sort of working. We're looking after a lot of the Lloyd's TSB or Lloyd's Bowmaker kind of insurance companies, TSB banks, Bank of Scotland's Royal Bank. So in fact, I remember going to Kenley, which was the kind of training centre in Surrey for Gardner Merchant, which is funny, isn't there now, but in its day was very, very innovative because I was so impressed as a young 20 something where they would bother to fly us to London and be met by a really cool guy. Actually, I remember in a kind of black polo neck and black jeans, and he met us on a Sunday night. And I said, "So, do you work here?" He said, "Yeah, I do, but I don't sort of live here. I'm about an hour and a half away." And to this day, it still struck me that he'd driven in on a Sunday afternoon to meet the sort of new recruits, then drove home, and then was back again at 8 o'clock the next morning to kind of properly welcome us. I just thought, what sort of a welcome and made me feel good for hospitality. So I was actually, which my mum could never believe, sort of trained as a young chef. And so I became a chef manager back in Scotland, predominantly between Edinburgh and Glasgow, in these different catering units with Bank of Scotland's and Lloyd's Bowmakers and places. In fact, what I was delighted to see this year in the King's Honours List was Bill Toner received an MBE. And Bill was my catering manager when I was a young whippersnapper
Right.
at Lloyd's Bowmaker back in the, well, I guess early 90s. And so it's funny how Bill and I have kind of had that nod that we've both sort of been in industrial catering at one stage, and his career has gone stratospheric, which is wonderful. But I enjoyed that because I enjoyed sort of predominantly sort of feeding the masses during the day, and then in essence doing some managerial stuff in the afternoon. But I was never a natural chef, to be honest, Phil. I mean, I had some real calamities with corn flour, with stovies, with mixing up
Oh,
supply.
stovies. I've not had a
Oh,
stovey in years.
well, oh, can't beat stovies, but not when
Absolutely.
it's bubbling away too vigorously on a range while I'm on the phone to a supplier, and then in my mind, actually turning the gas down and missing the potato that was dripping off the ceiling and kind of almost like what I would envisage napalm to be like. For me, it was like a sort of Indiana Jones escapade just to go and turn the oven off. No, so I had some many merry japes as a sort of young chef manager.
But there were some signs that perhaps this wasn't your calling, it
But it
sounds like.
wasn't. It wasn't necessarily. I mean, the old adage, as far as if you can do it, and if you can't, become a trainer and tell other people how to do it. And I
Right.
very quickly enjoyed talking to other people, becoming a sort of a district training manager or district training coordinator, I was called. So I went and did a lot of the sort of basic hygiene and health and safety and display and costing kind of training. But it's funny, one of my defining moments, Phil, was that I mean, I got to know the bank staff very well. You know, they were nice people, and I used to be in awe of the fact they would be there for kind of bacon rolls in the morning, then they'd be down for scones mid morning, and then they'd be there for lunch, and then they'd be back for afternoon tea. And I used to say to them once over the sort of time, I remember saying to a group of guys, saying, I'm really envious of you guys. You're here all the time. When do you ever do any work? You've got nice cars out in the car park. You've got smart suits. You know, you seem to be having a great job. But the real transformational thing for me was that they said, "Well, we come here and we look at you guys, and we're really envious of what you do because you've got the radio on, you're having fun, you've got a great team, you're being creative." They said, to kind of paraphrase, our job is almost we know what we're going to be doing for the next 30 years because we become a frontline bank person, then a assistant manager, a group manager, a statistician, a pension, and then a whatever the sort of the ladder is for banking. Whereas they said, we look at you guys and you could be working in a different part of the world, you could be working in a hotel, you could be at Murrayfield at the rugby ground, and it was quite a moment when the value of my job went from I'm just here serving you fish and chips on a Friday to actually, wow, they're really impressed with what we're doing. And the kudos I felt went absolutely sky high with me.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. And that speaks to something that actually you very kindly filled out on the form as well, around the fact that, and I really wanted to talk to you about this, not necessarily at this stage of the conversation, but we're here, so we might as well, which was historically, we've not been the greatest at like getting behind ourselves, as you know, how amazing this industry can be. And that, to have that conversation with, another industry basically who is looking at us with envious eyes, I mean, that has massive power and massive value in, kind of, I suppose, educating the world into what you might have thought about this industry might not be true, and look at all these amazing things that we can do.
I think you're absolutely right, Phil. And I mean, you're right. The expression, the image of the industry, has always been cited, and it's normally cited by industry people, and then by
Yeah,
saying, it's not quite so good, and the perception's this, but I suppose you could say that in some respects we're our own worst critics as far as we sort of, we're very passionate about the industry, but we do critique it much more, and it's easier to acknowledge what's not working, maybe rather than celebrating success, which I always think, the old Blanchard expression about catching people doing things right. I much prefer to focus on that sunnier side of life by a long shot. But you're absolutely right. I think the affirmation from an external sector, as far as these days, I kind of think our industry is so professional. The old stereotypes are really dim and distant now because you can't afford to run a business by not having any staff or by shouting at people or by
Yeah,
not paying them the right way or by not looking after them because the world is so transparent now. If you do that, you kind of get found out in a blink of an eye.
yeah,
And I do believe that sort of the professionalism and the qualities of people I certainly interact with within hospitality and tourism, they're absolute top of the range qualities, which any sector would be proud to have. And I guess the kind of compliment to our industry is that, the transferable skills do mean people go to other parts of industry around the world. But I do think that, the way the industry looks after its people and the diversity, and actually post COVID, some of the very good working practices that are now implemented in the good places,
yeah.
they really are second to none. And I think other industries would learn much more if they sort of got over the stereotypes about all we ever do is work people long hours and don't pay them very well. And I mean, maybe people even still perceive there's just cooking and cleaning in our industry as opposed to, the multitude of jobs that you and I know about.
Yeah, and you've absolutely nailed on the whole reason why this podcast exists is to talk about these very same things, which is,
Mhm.
that there's way, I mean, there's so many things that you can do in this industry. It's not just about cooking and cleaning and bartending, as you quite rightly say. I mean, just look at the two jobs that we've got
Yeah.
as an example as well. But also, you know, there I couldn't when I started the show, I couldn't see many places that were shouting from the rooftops about how amazing this industry is, and that's something that I think we all need to get way better and just be blindly confident about the fact that this industry is incredible. And yes, of course,
Mhm.
there are as per any sector, there are those who do things great, and there are some that regrettably still do things pretty poorly. But it just seems that we've been defined by the ones that do it poorly for such a long time, whereas there are way more that do it well.
No, you're absolutely right. And the irony of ironies is those bank people that I was talking about just a moment ago, the bank that I was particularly thinking about is now a block of flats. And when I occasionally
Right?
bump into sort of these guys who I thought had jobs for life, the credit crunch came along in sort of 2009 stroke 10 and wiped out all their jobs. So,
Yeah.
the kind of the jobs for life and the security that they thought they had actually disappeared sort of within a year. Whereas, as you say, you and I are still, affiliated with the industry, and because we enjoy it and we like it. And I mean, in Scotland, 180,000 people are in the industry. So unless they're not thinking straight, they must be in it because they like it, because there's a lot of choices in other sectors now. So we are a big employer, and I think all of us, I think, when it comes to free time on holidays, I mean, the first thing about a holiday, I think about hospitality and where I can eat, where the pubs might be, and
Yep.
local walks and tourism venues. So, it's a sort of enjoyable part of life, which you're right. We know the good things. I think we just constantly have to repeat that message, almost become consistently boring when we're talking about our industry.
Totally.
Just say how wonderful. I actually love it when I'm speaking to other people who are in other sectors, and I say to them, "When are you going to get a proper job?" Because
Yeah.
they're on strike or they're not complaining about the jobs. I say, "Well, when are you going to get an enjoyable proper job?"
Yeah, I used to. Well, I once upon a time got branded as being naively positive, and back then I would have said sorry, but now I say thank you. Because
Mhm.
I've come to learn that naivety is a wonderful trait and positivity is a wonderful trait, and the two of them together, I'm happy to be branded that
Yeah,
way.
that's a real compliment in my book.
Yeah, totally. So, move us along then. What happened next? What after the bank?
Yeah, well, as I say, moved into more of a district training coordinator role, and that led me to the hotel and catering training company, which was that's gone through many incarnations. I think there was it was the ITO to start with, the industry training organization. Then it was a sort of HCIMA, and then it became the HCTC, and I think it's probably now would be my understanding is it would be the Sector Skills Council is kind of what it really is.
Right.
But yeah, I sort of again was looking after a lot of vocational qualifications, modern apprenticeships as they were kind of starting off really, and getting a bit of a footing. One of the exciting projects I did was actually it was a Leonardo da Vinci project, which was by nature of the rules it had to be between three countries. And just by chance, there was France, there was Scotland, and there was Ireland involved. And being very stereotypical, actually, the Irish guys were Paddy, Mick, and Kevin. There was me and Annalise in Scotland, and in France there was Pierre and Michel. And so,
Right.
but the fundamental aspect of this project was actually about prisoners and giving them education so that they were kind of well trained with vocational qualifications when they kind of came out. Which is funny, actually, full circle. Now, quite a lot of progressive organizations are looking at sort of offenders and recognizing that some of the catering skills they have, are great after, the amount of time they've spent in the prison world.
Yeah.
But what was wonderful for me is that the French guys were actually based in Cannes. So we got flown to Nice and went to a lovely place called Grasse, which is the kind of perfume place. There's lovely fragrance in the air. But it was still, for all those people that say, prison's a soft option, when you go into prisons and they shut the door behind you and lock the door, and there's bars on the windows, and there was, in this case in France, there was actually wires across the kind of exercise yard to stop helicopters coming in, sort of picking people up. And you just sort of, there was always that undercurrent of tension. And again, it was sort of, it was a very progressive project that we did, but just certainly some moments when I remember in a Scottish prison, there was a kind of shadow knife board behind me in the catering manager's office. And I was chatting to the catering manager, but through the door, I could see this big inmate walking towards me with a 12-inch cook's knife. And he was
Right.
walking towards me, and I was chatting to the catering manager. And because of my upbringing, I was kind of too polite to say, look, this guy might be coming up to stab me or something. And as it was, he tapped me on the shoulder when he got within inches of me. And kind of then I realized there was a shadow board behind me, and he hung the 12-inch knife up behind my head.
Phew.
So I was thinking, imagine the explanation as far as I was stabbed. Did you say anything? Well, no, I was talking to the catering manager, so I felt I couldn't look to my left and say, I think this chap's coming towards me with a knife. But
Yeah.
it was a good project, and it gave me a kind of great. I kind of, I suppose, then was working in different places, which is something I've always quite enjoyed. Sort of having a kind of multi-site view. But through the hotel and catering trading company, we did some courses up at Gleneagles Hotel, and I got to know the people there quite well. Slightly by fate, I'd moved to a place that was sort of the other side of Edinburgh, because the HCTC offices were in a place called Cannon Mills in Edinburgh. So I enjoyed a sort of 20-minute drive to work. But when the opportunity for the training officer role came up at Gleneagles, which I was successful in getting, it suddenly meant quite a long journey to drive round Edinburgh, over the Forth Bridge, then up to Gleneagles. But that I was at Gleneagles for many years, and sort of by again a twist of fate, the training manager went off on maternity within about 6-8 months of me starting, and she went off on maternity and actually didn't come back, and so I was quite quickly elevated to be the training manager of Gleneagles, which was a prestigious role.
No doubt.
And
Yeah.
we had about 1,000 people there actually, so quite multidiscipline between the greenkeepers and the floristry department and the golf professionals, as well as all the chefs and the housekeepers and the management team. But I moved latterly to be sort of quite close to Gleneagles after driving up from Edinburgh for quite a long time, and I've been where I am now for 23 years. And Gleneagles is only about 25 minutes along the road from here, and it's still almost my spiritual home, I think. Although once or twice, Phil, I've been there, and I left 22 years ago now, I think it is. And sometimes the greenkeepers, they say, "Oh, hi, David, haven't seen you for a while. Are you busy in the training rooms?" And they makes me wonder what they thought when I actually worked there. The fact I could leave for 22 years, and they think I'm still there behind the scenes doing something.
They
But
haven't done any training then themselves in that time.
that's what makes me wonder.
Yeah, my God, yeah. I mean, what Gleneagles is, the pinnacle of Scottish hospitality, I suppose, in terms of it's world renowned. There's not many people who work in hospitality wouldn't have heard of Gleneagles, I think. So yeah, always a great to have the opportunity to work in a place like that, I would imagine.
Well, it was great. And by nature, as you rightly say, I was invited to external things because of Gleneagles, and they wanted a kind of Gleneagles representative there. But it gave me exposure to a lot of different sort of initiatives that were going on. And being the training and development organization that it is, allowed a lot of scope to put innovative courses in, to just support a lot of people. And I guess that's the kind of the mantra that I've always operated. It's sort of our industry is filled with great people, and having the chance to kind of influence and support them to get where they want to be. Now, because of the amount of people in the industry that have been through some of these big organizations, you sort of bump into them on a regular basis, and to me becomes a very friendly community that we're all part of, which I
Yeah.
just love. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that the community element of hospitality is alive and well. And,
Mm,
you could walk into a hotel in Liverpool and somebody would know you, and, you just pick up where you left off. And, that's,
yeah,
it's a massive industry, but it's a small industry at the
it
same
is.
time.
Absolutely. Indeed. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now, you had interesting choice of words for Gleneagles when you said that this gave you great exposure, because there's also a story about the full Monty in
Oh,
Gleneagles. It's a good segue, I
well,
thought.
goodness me. I don't know where you got that from, but there was a Christmas party that we had every year where the management team supported all the teams and served them lunch. And we also put on a kind of a cabaret show, shall we say. And it was the management team were kind of allowed to do whatever sort of act they want. Some people sang something, some people did a dance, some people did all sorts of kind of magician tricks. It was, in fact, in another, maybe over a glass of beer, Phil, there's some quite big leaders of the industry that were part of Gleneagles who did some quite outrageous acts. So that's for another story. But no, it was around the time of the Full Monty, and again back with the training rooms. Sometimes trying to get some of these senior people to do a training program, it was always a tough ask because they were busy full time people. But there was a group of five emerged, which happened to be kind of the procurement officer, the head gardener, the finance controller, which was a strange one, and one or two other gents, and me. But religiously, for about a month before the Christmas party, they would attend the training rooms on a Tuesday and Thursday evening. We actually put blue tack on the wee spy holes so no one could sort of see through the
Oh,
doors.
very secret squirrel.
And they would we'd play the full Monty thing, and these five inept dancers would actually we came up with a routine, particularly with the finance guy counting in kind of blocks of four. So we moved to the left for four, then moved to the right for four, and back for four. And secret friend in housekeeping, actually made a Velcro suit for us. And so we literally did the whole full Monty in front of about 800 people, with the finale of this Velcro suit came off and there was not a lot underneath. And I actually found a photo at the bottom of a desk drawer not that long ago, which I can't believe someone actually had cameras. Luckily, it was kind of roundabout pre-mobiles, only just. But that was a real moment in time, actually. I've never seen the people that were part of the troupe quite so engaged. And I like to think we got a massive cheer and everyone was absolutely applauding. I think in reality, Phil, I think everyone was laughing at
Yeah.
us.
Whatever works, right? Whatever works.
We made an impact. It went down well. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, but I love stories like that because they show the camaraderie that's possible, and the fact that when you're operating within a team that you genuinely care about, you'll always go above and beyond.
Mhm.
Now, you could argue that is the full Monty above and beyond. I don't know, but
Well, there's a footnote in that, Phil, because my lovely training officer, given that this was Christmas in February and Valentine's Day, I got this lovely Valentine's card anonymously with all these comments saying, "We saw the full Monty. We thought you're gorgeous. You got such a six-pack stomach," and I was really really flattered. And for years, I never knew who this card had come from. I mean, I was thinking maybe. I don't know who it's from,
yeah,
because there was lots of people that had written some quite crude comments on it, I must say. And then my training officer, she said, did you ever wonder where that card, because I kept it in my drawer. I thought this is kind of quite a momentous piece. She
Yeah.
said, I'm friends with the St Andrews Rugby Club. So once I bought this card and got the lads to write some comments, so whereas me thinking it was everyone giving me such great accolades for my full Monty performance, it was actually the Madras Rugby Club lads that took the opportunity to. So that was my bubble was burst.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah,
Well, no. Well, yeah, I mean, great times, I'm sure. I'm great.
yeah.
Yeah, how long were you actually at Glen Eagles for, all
It's
in?
97 to just over 2002. So in essence, just over 5 years, 5 or 6 years, I think it was.
Yep.
But again, I mean, industry icons like Peter Lederer, who is my general manager there, was the founder of Hit Scotland, actually. So even from a Gleneagles day, I was thrilled to be invited to go to Hit Scotland events because it was always seen as a sort of a special invitation. I mean, I hope it still is, but so I had sort of inklings of Hit Scotland, but didn't, know anything really more about it. But Gleneagles has always been very, even to this day, the relationship that I have personally, but also Hit has with Gleneagles and many other wonderful establishments in Scotland. It really has been a great grounding for me.
Yeah.
Five-star hospitality means having the right people in the right place at the right time, and that's exactly where RotaCloud can help. RotaCloud is the online platform that makes planning rotas, recording attendance, and managing annual leave easy. Its simple, drag-and-drop interface lets you create and share rotas with your team in minutes, while our built-in budgeting tools mean you'll know exactly how much you're spending on staffing before sending the rota out. RotaCloud also makes life easier for your staff, allowing them to check their rotas, request time off, and pick up extra shifts, all through the RotaCloud mobile app. Start your 30-day free trial today by visiting rotacloud.com/Phil and find out how much easier managing your team can be.
Yeah, no doubt. So, where did you go straight after Glen Eagles then, David?
Well, I went to look after and head up Springboard Scotland, promoting the industry as a career of choice. And that was a sort of an interesting move, having gone from a sort of a five-star resort to an office in a college in Glasgow, which they were very generously hosting us. But it was a different entity because this was then helping schools, helping people get into the industry, but also having to look at a lot of public funding. You know, people didn't come along in Rolls Royces and stay for a week and spend thousands of pounds. You know, you had to go to European funding and Scottish enterprise funding and Highlands and Islands. So, but I think luckily that as everyone recognized that the industry needed good people, whilst it was always a challenge for sure, I was able to build a team of actually 12 people that were based around Scotland, all generously housed in different colleges or universities around Scotland. And I think we really did make an impact there as far as producing materials and doing the kind of the talks that Springboard still do in schools and education to try and just, like we almost started off saying, kind of reverse a few of the stereotypes that people had about our industry.
Yeah, yeah. I have to say that it feels like a role like that must be deeply rewarding. Like just from the that concept of as we were talking about before we turned the microphone on, you're just elevating things and talking positively about things and all of that. I feel that must be a rewarding role.
It is. I always remember taking a group of teachers to St Andrews Bay. Actually, it's now a Fairmont hotel, and they were absolutely bowled over by the salaries, the technology, the benefits that people were getting, and they really didn't know that the industry was like that. And you're right; it was rewarding just seeing the sort of light bulb moment when they actually realized that it wasn't like silver service and the stereotypes that we talked about earlier on. It was
Mm.
actually very progressive. And you're right, when you help sort of people find, because I've always advocated that hospitality isn't for everybody. I don't think we should just take sort of people because they're there.
Yeah.
We need people that actually want to be there and have the right attributes that we all know and love. So it was great being able to just, if people were enthusiastic, giving them that sort of channel so that they could again be informed. Because almost back to my Gleneagles days, sometimes got people that would say, I'd love to work at the hotel. And in an interview sense, you say, well, that's great. What would you like to do? And they said, oh, just, I'd like to be in the hotel. I said, well, would you like to be in the equestrian center with the horses? They're like, no, 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 I don't want any. Well, would you like to work in the IT department? It's like, no, no, no. And we had 53 different departments at Gleneagles. And I still, again, to this day, tell people, be informed when you're looking for that first job, because, it's multidiscipline. Again, being able to kind of open the eyes of people was, as you say, very rewarding.
Yeah, I always advocate to people, if you think you want to come into hospitality, but you're not sure what you want to do within that, go and get a job on reception, because that will, if nothing else, will teach you so many life skills.
Yeah.
And you get to see the best and worst of the public that you're dealing with, and it just teaches you so many things around. I mean, I still remember my time on the front desk on a cruise ship. You know, the best of times and the worst of times, depending on what was going on. But even in the worst of times, you learn so much about yourself, and you learn how to cope when things have not gone to plan, and
Yeah.
and all of these things that you kind of maybe I take for granted, but know that that was a very formative time.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. So no. Again, that word exposure, I guess it gave me quite a lot of exposure, and thinking about it, Hit Scotland only gives out one industry award every year, and I in 2004 received the Hit Industry Award for kind of services to hospitality,
Right.
which really kind of opened my eyes as far as I'd never really been acknowledged like that or recognized. I just thought I was beetling around the country, sort of trying to be as effective as possible. But it was a lovely another moment in time. Actually, I've still got the trophy upstairs, because it just was, I suppose, a bit of endorsement for what you're doing.
Yeah.
People recognize, and I guess we all like to make or have the feeling that we're making a difference. And so it was a lovely accolade to receive completely out of the blue as well.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. And to be clear, I'm assuming you weren't working at Hit at the time when you got the award.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. But funny you say that. I mean, Stephen Carter, who followed on from Peter Lederer as the sort of very enigmatic chair of Hit Scotland, we had a coffee one day, and he said, "Look, we Hits hasn't didn't have any employees really, it didn't have any team around it," and he said, "Look, we want to make bigger impacts. We'd like to sort of start taking people on." And as often happens, maybe over a coffee, he said, would this be an attractive role for you? And whilst I love the roaming role of Springboard, that horrible F word funding is always a challenge. I mean, I know money governs everything we do, but actually getting money out of Europe and out of the public sector was, even back in the sort of 20 years ago, was a challenge. It became harder and harder, or you spend more and more time getting less and less money. And so the sort of attractiveness of having literally a blank sheet and being able to kind of almost design my role actually became very attractive, because I demonstrated to myself that I had a strong work ethic and I was a self-starter. And also I always joke that, I mean, Hit took me on for 3 days a week, or they paid me for 3 days a week, although I always feel I worked 7 days a week for them, because
Right.
it literally was on my first day at my kind of home office, which is where I'm sat today. I remember one of my trustees phoned up at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. He said, nice to see you. Welcome to Hit Scotland. Where are you? I said, well, I'm at my kind of desk. And he said, oh, I thought you might be on the golf course or something. And I was like, it's my first day of work. And
Yeah.
he said, well, what are you doing? I said, well, no one's really told me what to do. I'm here. In fact, I haven't even got any stationery or anything. And so Fergus Chambers, who's still a trustee, he was looking after all the school catering in Glasgow City Council. So the next day I went to Glasgow. His PA gave me a box of staplers and rulers and sellotape and notepads and big biros. And I've still probably got some of those upstairs in the desk at the moment. And then the week after, Stephen's IT team came and kind of fitted me up with ISDN lines and a telephone. And so in some respects, Phil, it was a lovely opportunity, but it really was a kind of one of those things that I always thought, if I leap, a net will appear. And I took the leap, and a supportive industry net did appear. And back in the sort of, 2004 stroke 5, HIT was mainly supporting students, particularly kind of financially helping them with their studies with an aim to get into the industry. But it was only doing maybe two or three events a year plus a couple of golf days a year. Whereas now, having actually was celebrating its 30th anniversary in last year in 2024, we did 30 events last year, and
Wow.
it's now everything has gone quite stratospheric on the numbers and on the fundraising and on the enjoyment and on the engagement actually as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's also important, right? The enjoy, and I mean, I can absolutely attest to the enjoyment factor at your events. I mean, I have only been to two, both of them in London. Your annual Hit Scotland London lunch, the one just gone by with Giles Brandreth.
Yeah,
Honestly,
what a
I mean, have
star.
you had any better guests than he? He was absolutely epic.
Well, he was. We've been fortunate that I mean, I have to say, every guest speaker we've had, has brought something to the table. And I find it fascinating that I sometimes sit there thinking, where else would you hear these people?
Yeah.
Would you have that close proximity? You'd really maybe have a story of this is what it's like. And so, but as you say, Giles, the fact he'd just come from Buckingham Palace and he was off to do a podcast afterwards, the generosity of time and spirit that many, many people offer is just absolutely immense. It's funny actually, by sometimes not paying people, you get more out of it than actually having sort of a more contractual arrangement. I've found now.
Yeah, yeah, I can. I never really thought of that, to be honest. Yeah, you think that if it's a contractual arrangement, then there's a process to follow and blah blah blah. But actually, if they're just there out of the kindness of their heart, then maybe it just comes from the heart a little bit more.
Well, I think so. Well, I think that's what makes Hits unique is that we have. It's funny. I wrote to our committees that put on our events for us. We have sort of professional event management, but we also have some wonderful volunteers that become the Highland Dinner Committee or the Edinburgh Lunch Committee or the Industry Dinner Committee or the London Committee. And because it was our 30th anniversary last year, I wrote to them to say thanks for what a great year it had been and to celebrate the industry with 30 years. And there was 117 people that I wrote to. And I was surprised actually. There was just so many people that,
Mm.
as you say, gave up their time, had heart and soul commitment to make their event or their activity or their entertainment the absolute top notch for the industry on behalf of the industry. So, yes, I'm surrounded by some incredibly generous people that I sometimes think treat and manage and support Hit Scotland even more than they do their own businesses because they want to get it right for the industry.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. What have been some of your kind of major highlights in your time? Because you're basically 20 years
It's my
in.
20th anniversary this year. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean, I suppose very difficult question to answer because there's probably been so many by the sounds of it.
Well, they have. I mean, there really, really has, Phil. And I mean, because they've been from the absolute joy of the scholarships and the support and the kind of feedback we've had from people when we've just sort of looked after them, organized a development opportunity for them, and it's really given them motivation or confidence or enhanced their career to go on to good things. But in addition, on a fundraising challenge, I've managed to climb Kilimanjaro twice now. Once in 2011 with a great group of people that, in fact, it's the 14th anniversary this month of us getting to the summit. And then again in 2022, although strangely, none of the original 2011 people joined me on the 2022
Is that
challenge.
right?
They gave me that look as far as you're mad doing it again. But we've, been fortunate enough to be on the Great Wall of China in Machu Picchu. We did the highest mountain in Italy called the Gran Paradiso. So we've had some great activities that have come with the job that have raised hundreds of thousands of pounds. I mean, many millions over the years, actually. And it's been I like the expression, it's put the fun into fundraising. We've had a
Very
lot of
good. Yeah.
fun, done some opportunities that you'd never get to do, but all in the spirit and the one goal of raising money to support the scholarships of the emerging talent of our industry. So we did used to do some Euro challenges that were great fun, but sort of had their time when we drove to different vineyards around Europe, which, well, we drove to start with, and then we actually changed that after 2 years to flying somewhere and then getting a bus because driving to vineyards is not good these
No,
days.
no.
Probably never very good. But just the different events. I mean, I joke that sort of Edinburgh doesn't go to Glasgow for lunch, or Aberdeen doesn't go to Inverness for dinner, and the islands are different, and Dundee is different, but they genuinely are. And even in a small country like Scotland, the speakers that we've had in Edinburgh, like the captain of the QE2 or the Virgin Galactic director, or Scottish rugby players have been very different to Glasgow, where we've had the Bay City Rollers or Tim Minchin or Paul Zerden, the ventriloquist, or uh, we had Jason Donovan last year. I mean, who
Right.
thought when I was a student in Sheffield watching Neighbours, suddenly Jason would be there having a drink with him before he starts singing a few of his famous songs.
That's incredible. Yeah.
It is incredible, and I've been very fortunate on that front.
Yeah, yeah. How does that even come up? How do you get Jason Donovan to come and do an event?
Well, as you said, the industry is very small, and everyone's got a friend of a friend. So I think that 6 stages of separation is probably very true, actually. And
Right.
so there's, and even if someone has stayed in a hotel, they've got his details or her details. So it's funny how routes to market can happen surreptitiously as well. But it's no, again, we've been very fortunate with a whole lot of entertainment that again has been just so good and has engaged with the crowd, which has made them feel generous, which has raised some more money, which has allowed us to put things back into the industry. I suppose the catch-all for that, Phil, is by keeping things simple and not overcomplicating things and working in collaboration, but respecting our sort of channel, then that just seems to work. We're a very light organization, very little overheads. I've got no offices or anything like that. All our meetings take places in nice organizations, whether it's a cafe or a pub or a hotel reception or whatever it might be. But again, that comes back to the generosity of the industry that just supports the industry.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I think there's a lot made of the fact that we're, in the end, we're much stronger together as a unit, pulling in the same direction
Yeah.
than a tribal approach pulling in different directions.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well, 100%. And in fact, on that point, I mean, Hit Scotland has Scotland in the name. I certainly never feel that we're parochial or a parochial Scottish charity, but I think the network and the camaraderie is just slightly different in Scotland. So it's sort of a big enough place for us because we don't really have the connections in Manchester, Birmingham, or Newcastle. And London is a sort of slightly different because there are quite a lot of London Scots, or quite a few of our key sponsors are based in London. So rather than getting them to come up to Scotland all the time, it's a nice excuse for us to go to London for sort of one day only, just to have a bit of fun, but re-engage with a lot of our friends down south. But it's the same with our scholarships. You don't have to be Scottish to get a scholarship. It's really just about working or studying in Scotland to enable you to become a scholar. So again, we work in a global market these days. But what actually makes Hit Scotland unique is that there isn't any other entity around the world like us. There isn't a kind of a sister organization in America or Australia or in Europe. We are actually quite unique, which I'm very proud of, actually.
yeah, totally, totally. Now, a couple of things I'd love to touch upon as well. One, just kind of going back to the beginning of your time with Hit. When effectively you're designing the role yourself, was there any point where you thought, what have I done? What have I done? Like, there's no direction here. I don't. What am I supposed to be doing?
Well, there was a bit of that because there wasn't really a template. And, I had a young family at that stage. I'd had a secure job. So it wasn't in my nature to kind of do something that would become, well, a 3 day a week job. But I guess because of my connections with the industry and my incredibly supportive trustees, people started saying that there isn't a Grampian event up in Aberdeen. Could we do something up here? Or the scholarship program was maybe a real game changer because that was a way of really demonstrating about helping the industry by providing some development opportunities, which, the industry does an awful lot of good development, but sometimes just that extra level is quite hard to find. So, back in the first talent conference we had, actually in February in a very snowy Aviemore resort, we had 8 applications for scholarships and we gave out 8 scholarships. Bring us up to last year, we had over 800 applications for scholarships and we gave
Wow.
out 319. And so I think my being seen to help people, my sort of 3 day a week crept to 4 days a week. We were then actually approached by Lausanne in Switzerland, Cornell in New York, and also Strathclyde Business School to head up an international leadership school, which was a kind of a 2-year executive master's program. And I was flattered into being called the chief executive of that international leadership school. But again, another fantastic industry body of people around me that sort of made that work. And that worked for about 4 years. And that was looking at the more senior end of the industry to complement some of our other craft scholarships. But because of the engagement with that, kind of crept my days up to 5 days a week. So
Right.
I sort of found that things were gravitating towards me and making me have an absolute full-time job. And because of that, sponsorship came along as well. The fundraiser of Kilimanjaro was a fantastic thing just after the credit crunch, and we raised hundreds of thousands of pounds doing that first Kilimanjaro expedition. And again, that sort of put us on the map. So people started applying for more scholarships. We were able to help more organizations. The scholars were a fantastic word of mouth referral. So things just sort of snowballed, really, Phil. They kind of, if you're my trustees, I would say it was part of the complete overall strategy to engage with the industry. But I think sometimes by recognizing opportunities or by not pushing things back when they come knocking at the door, then you sort of start getting more recognition as far as an organization that can be there to help the industry. And I think by being apolitical, by working with everybody, by supporting other initiatives as much as possible and giving out scholarships to other entities that might help sort of their aims, it just sort of hopefully makes us a impartial, non-threatening setup that can work with everybody all for the betterment of the industry, as you say, or pulling in the same direction. So
Yeah.
I mean, maybe a defining point on that was that when the COVID hit, and of course we all know the damage it did to our industry, a number of people were saying to me, "Well, what are you doing as a Scottish charity to help the industry?" Now, if you think about it, our main fundraiser was through events, which were not allowed, and the main outcome of those fundraising activities were the scholarships. But again, everyone was either quarantined, on furlough, or not allowed to go out. So
Yeah.
in all honesty, we were absolutely stuffed ourselves. And I was part of a number of kind of, resilience meetings as far as, well, how can we help the industry? And there was all sorts of different suggestions that came up. And I spoke to a few people and I suggested, why don't we do something about leadership, management, and supervisory online? Because whatever happens, we're going to have to look after people whenever COVID finishes, because we just didn't know at that stage.
Yeah.
And I think maybe in the absence of anything else that was on the table, everyone sort of rallied behind that, including the Scottish government, to be fair, because we've not ever really had any public sector funding. But the government recognised what we were doing. And so we put it out there for 1,000 online scholarships. And we actually had 2,088 applications. And
Wow.
in the first year of COVID, there's no way we can sort of turn down almost 50% of the applications. So the government supported us even more, and we took on 28 online trainers that we devised a program with a great training organization to have 10 modules, and each module was about 4 hours in length. And this would be over 10 weeks. And so we had at the heyday of that about 85 cohorts of 25 people, all from around the industry, all quite disparate. And not only did that give great engagement and kept people knowledgeable, but it also had many unintended consequences, like just making people feel part of a community. And if people were in a flat by themselves, in quarantine, in whatever place they were at, they knew that every Wednesday morning at between 9 o'clock and 12:30 or whatever it was, they would have connection with 24 other people who were probably in the same boat in different parts of licensed trade or visitor attractions or restaurants or hotels or caravan parks. It was quite eclectic. And it was a real success story, actually. It really was sort of transformational. And in fact, it was the biggest intervention of training of its type ever seen in Scottish
Is that
hospitality.
right? Right.
And so that was sort of what 2021, well, sorry, yeah, 2020 really. We ran it again in sort of 2021 just to prove it wasn't a one-off kind of fluke. And the second year we had about 1,600 people. So there's 3,600 people went through a massive training intervention over the COVID time. And I think, in all honesty, Phil, that really set us up because we then were helping so many more people. We were seen as a charity that was actually stepping up to the plate to help people and give them that encouragement during lockdown when really everyone was in despair. And so that was a lovely game changer for us because I think the success of HIT post COVID has been because we've been able to engage with so many more people that they've liked getting back with our sort of community, and they're providing prizes or attending our events or buying a ticket or hosting a scholar. So it just gives us so much more coverage now, which is something to build on. So it's funny, out of adversity, it's like a lot of, we had to change because we'd never done online learning before ever.
Yeah.
And whilst we still do a little bit of it now, I think last year we had about 50 scholarships were online. The majority out of the 319 were all live and back to going to Switzerland or Nuremberg or America or Dubai or whatever. But it's interesting how we changed and the industry changed. But it was fortunate. Otherwise, might not be speaking now.
Well, as you quite rightly say, out of adversity, ideas come, right? So, because in some cases you don't have a choice, you either have to do something or that's it. It's game over. And it sounds like it definitely played its part in one, I suppose, the continued evolution of what you can do and are able to do. But two, you needed to do it.
Well, that's right. And a funny moment on a Monday morning once in the sort of height of lockdown, I remember sitting at my desk with nothing really happening because the world was in lockdown. And so I got a blank sheet of paper out because after decades of giving kind of advice to other people, I thought I'd better take my own advice and actually
Yeah.
kind of write down some of my skill set and everything else and get myself ready just in case. And I wrote my name at the top of a blank piece of paper, Phil. And then I thought about my skills and my attributes and put it this way, the sheet is still blank. I went and made a pot of coffee and I thought, I can't quite think what I might be able to add to this list. But luckily that never had to come into action. And I should frame that somewhere, my skill set of nothing with my
Well,
blank sheet of
not
paper.
strictly true. We have established that you're very good with milk. So,
That's true.
yeah.
I'll put Pergol management is the
Yeah.
number one. I'll add that. I will do that after this call.
Very good, very good. Yes. I can't let it pass without talking about your MBE, if you're happy to go there.
Well,
Some people are very, very humbled about. I mean, assuming you're quite a humble gentleman anyway, so I would assume you're quite humbled by this as well. So it's sometimes difficult to talk about, but yeah, how did that come about?
Well, I mean, it's wonderful actually, and I'm absolutely still over the moon about that, Phil. I mean, the actual mechanics. I mean, some great people behind the scenes obviously got together, unbeknown to me. But jumping around, I sort of now know who they are because my wonderful colleague Kirsty McLeod, she presented me after I received the MBE with a book of all the letters that people had put in a submission to the right sort of offices in Buckingham Palace. And it's just so heartwarming to read what people have written about me, in sort of the commendation. But the actual sort of technicality, it was during COVID, it was 2020, when it was a lovely, I must admit, it was a nice summer afternoon on a Friday, and I was having a beer in the garden with my laptop, and an email came
You weren't on
through.
the golf course, not on the
That's
golf course.
not the golf
Yeah,
course,
yeah,
right? But an email came through from the honors office or whatever, and it said, you've been nominated. Please click here, and sort of if you'd like to read more and if you'd like to accept this honor. And I was thinking, oh no, I've got a sort of spam email and
yeah.
everything, and 'cause I just didn't sort of expect to get an email. So I googled the email address, and sure enough, it was the sort of the honor. It was the official honors office, and so I did open the email, and it said, you've been nominated, and the Queen, which I was delighted with, actually. The Queen would like to recognise you for services hospitality. And so I was absolutely kind of starstruck, and we live near Loch Leven, which is only 20, 30 minutes away. Because it was locked down and we were allowed to go for a walk, my wife and I walked to the loch and we were chatting away, and we got to Loch Leven. And I said, I got a kind of an interesting email today. And she said, oh, well, you get quite a lot of emails. I said, yeah, but this was one. I'll give you three guesses. Who do you think it might be from? She said, oh, no, well, I don't know. It was from the Queen. I said, yes, it was from the Queen. And so, as I say, we're absolutely thrilled. And I mean, because of COVID, there was quite a lull before actually going to Windsor Castle, which I went to. And that was actually in 2022. So it was sort of maybe 18 months after I got this summertime letter or email. But to meet up with Princess Anne, to be kind of again recognized, I think the biggest honor for me is the fact this is something that money can't buy. It's not like you can sort of
Yeah.
curry favor, or you can't, it's sort of recognition for what you've done as opposed to what you're going to do. So I guess after many decades in the industry, right back from the milk machines, it was just lovely sort of again endorsement of making a difference, and it's a real. I'm very very proud of it.
Yeah, quite right too, and especially because I was just this week I had a conversation with Martin Trainer, OBE,
Yes,
and
yes,
he made a very wry joke about what the OBE stands for. His wife,
indeed.
yes, reminded him. So for those who don't know, the joke is OBE is others, as he puts it, buggers effort,
That's
and
right.
MBE is my buggers effort. So at least in this case, it was all you, David. It was all you.
Well, I mean, I don't want to be too cliche, but I mean, it's something I think for the industry in Scotland and for all my colleagues as well. I mean, I still very much see us as a sort of team setup, and so the industry has enabled me to be recognised, but it's one for the industry, but certainly one for the baby book as well.
Yeah.
To get a sort of big letter from the Queen and Prince Philip as well in those days, it was just these are the sort of things that are life moments. And I suppose what is lovely actually, Phil, is my dad got an MBE for services to the Commonwealth Games in Edinburgh
Really?
in 1986, because being a headmaster in Edinburgh, he looks after quite a lot of the dignitaries. So I kind of feel that's, again, lovely to follow your father's footsteps by
Yes.
a few decades in between, but still something for my two kids anyway, something for them to
Yeah,
aspire
yeah.
to.
They'll be looking at you going, damn you, Dad. God, jeez.
Sorry, kids.
The pressure now. But, what you have to remember as well is that you obviously sowed the seed with the Commonwealth Games with your, leading,
Yeah.
being fully responsible for the Commonwealth Games.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's right. I know. And that makes me 102 now or whatever.
Superb. Look, David, thank you so much for spending some time today. It's been an absolute joy to learn about your journey. Another wonderful, unique journey through hospitality. Still got work to do, no doubt. Yeah, what does the future hold for HIT as we stand today?
Well, there's an exciting project we're looking to do. We're calling it Project Minerva, which you'll know, Phil, is the goddess of wisdom and learning, back
Yeah,
from
I
your
knew
Greek
that. Yeah, yeah,
days.
I knew that.
Indeed.
Yeah,
And that's going to be something that, again, we'd like to think is going to be very innovative for the industry, where we'll bring in some experts from around the world. But rather than having courses or scholarships run in a traditional training center, we might have them at a hospitality box at a sports stadium, but then the accommodation will be in a local hotel. And so we'll bring world experts in, but then have evening hospitality where people can talk to other experts over a more informal dinner. And we did a lot of research over the last 18 months with the industry, and we've got 8 topical areas. And I think this will be a real exciting opportunity for some of the more senior management within the industry to really push themselves forward, but in a style that hospitality likes. And we've identified sort of notionally 18 different venues around Scotland that might be a train, it might be an iconic restaurant, it might be a lighthouse up in the Orkney and Islands, it might be all sorts of different sort of types of venue. So we'll have iconic training in iconic venues in short, sharp modules and bring in some world experts, in addition to all the events and the other scholarships that we do. But try and just really create that momentum of a kind of learning environment and actually address many of the good old image issues that we've talked about earlier, as
yeah.
far as having really professional, well trained leaders of the industry, which lots of good things should cascade from that. So there's some big meetings taking place in January this year, and we'd be looking probably for the autumn of this year, 2025, to kind of have the start of the rollout for that. But I think that's another S curve for Hit Scotland, and something I'm very personally excited to get involved with. So this industry's got a way of just sort of reeling you in, Phil, and there's always something around the corner. Which, if it works and it's right for the industry first and foremost, then I'm going to grasp that with both hands.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That sounds amazing. That sounds like you're quite unique as well. I'm trying to think if anything like that exists at the moment, and
No.
it sounds amazing.
Yeah, I think it will be. I mean, I'd love to tell you more, actually. There's a lot more detail, but maybe for now, let me just get the whole thing kind of up and running in the right sort of way, and to do a podcast on Project Minerva when the time's right would be just superb. I'd really
Fantastic.
enjoy that. It'd be a sign of success.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Yes. If people want to learn more about HIT Scotland, where can they find you?
They could go to hitscotland.co.uk is probably the best channel for everything. All my details are on that. We're anything with at Hit Scotland on gets us on Instagram or LinkedIn or Facebook. So our social media is actually quite high profile because we've got a lot of good stories to tell. There's a lot
Yeah.
of, but if you put Hit Scotland in HIT Scotland, then we should appear top of the list.
Fantastic. You're not on TikTok yet?
No, I do like a bit of TikTok actually. I've got some
Yeah.
great recipes. I keep getting told off for watching TikTok too much, but it's
Right.
slightly compulsive viewing, and you can certainly waste a lot of time.
Certainly.
But actually, interestingly, for holiday destinations, and if you put the destination or a restaurant into TikTok, you've got to take some of the views with a pinch of salt. But it's who would have thought, that would have been a way of finding out about your next holiday or the next restaurant by someone kind of walking through it, doing a very good video. I'd love to be able to do some of those TikTok dances. I think some of those,
Well, you've
but
had the practice. Get that full Monty routine back out again and get the band back together.
I think I would be limiting my audience considerably. uh, in fact, I'd have the only TikTok with no viewers, no followers. But, no, thanks. I'll get out those old steps. That's right. 4 to the left, 4 to the right.
You never forget. You never forget.
Never forget.
So, superb. David, thank you so much. Wish you guys all the very best with the next stage and look forward to catching up with you again at an event soon, I'm sure.
Well, I look forward to that as well, Phil. And thanks for having me today. And I look forward to more and more podcasts this year. They're fantastic to listen to as I'm driving around Scotland. So hats off to what you do. And here's to a healthy and successful 2025 for all of us and our friends in the industry.
Amen to that. Thanks, David. Cheers.
My pleasure. Bye then, Phil.
Bye-bye. And there we have it. Spending some time with David was just wonderful, and he's a prime candidate for the nicest human being on the planet. What he and HIT Scotland are doing is quite marvellous. We will, of course, be back next Wednesday with another amazing story from hospitality, so until then, have an awesome week, and I'll see you then.